So let me show you a couple of methods that work really well for dealing with difficult students. There are different students out there, a bunch of different ones that are difficult to deal with. We'll talk a little bit more about those later on, but they all basically boil down to the exact same thing. They are disrupting the class. Number one responsibility as an educator is to maintain a conducive environment, what I call a sterile environment, especially when they're testing. A sterile environment, which means it's as quiet as it can be, the lighting is right, you don't have a lot of racket and movement and all that stuff going on around you. Okay? No matter which student you're talking about, they are disrupting the class. So there are a couple of different ways of dealing with those folks. Okay? So one of which is to close the distance. If you've got somebody who's on your phone or on their phone and not paying attention to what's going on, but you've got everybody else engaged and you don't want to break and totally disrupt the class, then simply closing the distance. So I'm right now talking about difficult students, and I'm going to continue talking. And it's generally, again, the students are talking about they're disrupting the classroom. That's all it takes. Made eyes. He knows that I know that he's doing something that, and he knows it's wrong. He knows it's whatever. So all I had to do was make eyes. Sometimes it's a matter of you simply just stop. Because I don't talk, my rule is do not talk over other people. I think it is extremely rude for you to talk when somebody else is talking. So I just stopped talking. So if the two of you were talking, I'll just stop talking and look at you. And eventually, the people realize that there's no sound in the room. And they look up to see what it is, and you see the instructor looking at you. That's all it takes. If you are respected, you have to be respected. You have to control the classroom. You have to let them know from day one that you're in control of the classroom. It's like being a leader and a manager. Okay, there's a difference in the two. Leaders are leaders, and people know they're a leader. They don't have to say, I'm the leader. People follow them because they respect them. Same thing with being the instructor. When you start off on top when the students walk in and you're teaching the class. You start off on top. Now, where you go from there is totally up to you. As long as you stay on top and you stay in control and let people know that this is acceptable, that's not acceptable, simply in actions and the way that you handle yourself, it don't take long for them to realize that, okay, he's going to control the classroom and, he's respected. I don't have to be a jerk about it. I don't have to call you out. Don't ever try, unless it's absolutely necessary, you do not want to reprimand or call somebody out in public. Handle them in private. Praise in public, but reprimand and handle them in private. So much easier. You'll gain so much more respect from that. The only time you need to reprimand in public is when it's something that can not go unaddressed. Racial slurs, anything that would be, harassing, whatever the case may be. Immediately, when you hear that, you call it off and you let everybody know that is totally unacceptable. And that covers you too, in case, because one, you let them know that's not acceptable. The whole class knows I'm not going to accept that. And it kind of covers you because, if sexual harassment, telling, jokes that have sexual connotations and all that, which means I condone it, it's okay to do that. And then somebody in the back is offended by that and they go complain, and they complain that you were allowing it, you're just as guilty as the person who said it. So that's why it's so important to say, whoa, that is totally unacceptable and will not be allowed. It's the only time that it's really okay to reprimand somebody in public like that. So back to dealing with difficult students. Reprimand in public when you absolutely have to, but you want to keep it as down low and as off-key, as low key as possible. Closing the distance is one thing, to simply just close the distance. Silence, just stop talking and look at whoever it is that's been distracting. Sometimes that's all it takes. Heather Davis, I have to give her credit for it. She is a well-known educator, and I believe she is with Los Angeles. She is like the educator for Los Angeles Fire or something like that, some huge service. And she's the one who come up with this solution. It is simply a card that she keeps that has some of those common things like you're being disruptive, please put your phone away, please step out of the classroom, whatever, just a couple of little things that are on there. So again, she's talking, she's carrying on a conversation, she recognizes that a student is doing something that is not acceptable, she fills it out, continues to talk, and as she's talking, she just walks up and lays it on the desk and continues to go without disrupting the classroom. That is one method that you could use to have those little cards. You don't have to write anything. It's already there. It's just a little check. Just a little check. Walk up, lay it down, says, if you would, put the phone away or whatever the case may be. At that point, I've done two different things. I've given you something tangible that tells you what I would say, but I'm not disrupting the class. But I've also closed the distance. And sometimes just, again, closing the distance will make people uncomfortable and they will stop doing whatever it is that they're doing that's disruptive. Those are a couple of different things that you can do. Now, if necessary, you can ask people to step out of the classroom. I realize, if your phone just rang out, I know you probably need to take that, but if you would please, step out. See, it's my responsibility to handle and keep the environment as conducive to learning as possible. Other things, I'm gonna call her out there in the back. She has a computer sitting on her desk and she has it open. It's perfectly acceptable to do that. Some people take notes on it. I'm assuming that's what she's doing. She's in the back of the classroom, so her computer screen is not visible to anybody else. So it's not really that big of a deal, unless I don't think she's paying attention. So at that point, I could, especially if I'm using a PowerPoint, I'm like, all right, here are a couple of objectives. I want you guys to read over that. And I'll go to the back of the class and I'll look and see what's on the computer screen to see that, okay, she's not on YouTube, she's not on Facebook or whatever, she's taking notes. I'm cool. That's one method of doing that. Now, if she's sitting here in the front row, her computer screen's up, I'm probably going to check it a little quicker to make sure that she's not on YouTube or Facebook. Or you can read your class too. I mean, if you see that everybody here keeps looking at her computer screen, then I've got a problem because you're not paying attention to me, you're seeing what she's doing. And I'll have to address what's going on there. If she's taking notes and it's being that distracting, the situation she's in right now is a solution. Say, hey, if you don't mind, I see a lot of people looking at your screen. Can you move to the back? Because I know exactly what you're doing. You're taking notes and it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But it's distracting other people. So perfectly fine with that. You can catch them after class. That's one of the times to catch them, when they come out for break or something. Just say, hey, if you don't mind, would you do this? You can do that with any of the students, any of the disruptive students or whatever. Hey, if you don't mind, catch me after class. You got that war story student. Oh, there was this one time. Oh, we went out and did this. And oh, we went out and did this one time. And good thing to do with them is, if you'll hold your questions for a little bit or your statements, I appreciate it. It sounds really good and I'd love to hear about it. But I've only got a little bit of time. I need to cover these other things. So just a couple of different ways. Be polite. You don't have to be a jerk about things. It helps to know that, for starters, silence is acceptable in the classroom. If you ask questions of the class, give them time to answer. Because if you don't, you are what I call Pavloving. That's exactly what you're doing. You're Pavloving them into knowing that I don't have to answer it because he's going to answer himself. So if I say, what are the contraindications to atropine? Tachycardia, that's one of them. But If I do and nobody answers, then I'll wait. It's okay. And if too long a period goes by, then you may not have been clear in your question. You can, change it up. But eventually that silence becomes uncomfortable, just like dealing with difficult students. That silence becomes uncomfortable and somebody's going to say something. Even if it's wrong, they're going to say what they're thinking. And that is a good form of assessment, again, because you're assessing the classroom. And it's a very generalized assessment because you're not assessing individuals, you're assessing the entire class. And you ask the question, the group is not responding, they don't seem to be getting it. So I'm like, okay, clearly we need to work on atropine. So let me come up with a couple of things and then refocus. Okay. Again, closing the distance, difficult students, by closing the distance, you can use the little note cards if you want to, redirecting them, asking them to step out, whatever you need to do to prevent the student from being disruptive to the classroom. Worst students, most difficult students to deal with, in my opinion, because I am an introvert, believe it or not, are the assertive, aggressive students that are very dominating of conversations, and the ones that, eventually you have to confront them and you have to, after class or whatever. Worst case scenario, you can ask them to leave. Hey, I paid for this class. I don't have to leave. No, you do have to leave, because there are 25 other people in this class that paid for the class as well, and you're being disruptive. You've got two options. You can sit there and be quiet and ask questions that are relevant, or you can leave the classroom. That's a last case resort, but you can do that. And if you have to have them escorted out of the classroom, because at that point it starts becoming unsafe, and it is, they are not providing a conducive, you are not providing a conducive environment for learning, you can absolutely have them escorted out. Again, that is an absolute worst case scenario. I've never, ever had anything like that happen, but it is obviously very possible.